Today I wanted to talk about one of the games that I'm the most hyped about coming into this year, and that is Black Myth Wukong. I love the Souls series, as I'm sure a lot of you do, and this is one of the most promising action RPGs in that vein that I've seen come up. Here's the description, straight from the devs themselves. Black Myth Wukong is an action RPG rooted in Chinese mythology. The story is based on Journey to the West, one of the four great classical novels of Chinese literature. You set out as the Destined One to venture into the challenges and marvels ahead, to uncover the obscured truth beneath the veil of a glorious legend from the past. It's not an open world game, despite having pretty open areas to explore. It's organized into different levels and it has branching paths, so along the way, you'll be fighting a large amount of different enemies. According to a supposed leak, Black Myth Wukong promises a varied combat experience with over 160 plus enemy types and 80 plus bosses. If that's anywhere near true, this game is going to be pretty massive. Just for a bit of context, Sekiro has 50 bosses, Dark Souls 3 has around 24, and Elden Ring has over 200. But it's all about how the game plays, really, and that's make or break for a game like this. You can have 1,000 bosses, but if they're all a chore to get through, then it's still not good. We've seen a good amount of gameplay at this point. Various outlets have had hands-on sessions, and the majority of opinions that have come out of those sessions have been very positive. There are not only two different attack patterns, light and heavy, but also different stances. You can swap between those stances on the fly and do things like allow you to attack from a further distance away, use your staff to extend up, and have stronger attacks. The extending up thing is actually really cool looking, and I'm really curious how people will be using that. But that's not all that's in your arsenal. You also have the ability to use a variety of different magic spells, and if that's not enough, you also have different transformations. This allows you to use different elements such as fire, poison, and other things like that. The amount of variability is staggering. We have yet to see everything Black Myth Wukong has to offer. It's very fast-paced, leaning more towards the style of something like Sekiro. You don't seem to have the ability to block, though there are various abilities you can use that can mitigate damage. You'll be spending your time dodging around the fights instead of trying to soak damage. Although there is an ability that lets you turn to stone or something, it seems like. According to the people that have played it, it actually feels pretty unique outside of comparisons to other games, especially because in Black Myth Wukong, your main weapon is a staff. And because of all the different ways that you can wield that staff. One second you're getting up close and personal with your enemies, the next you're hitting them from a far distance. So there are a lot of questions we still don't have the answer to for Black Myth Wukong. One of those being whether there will be any other weapons outside of the staff and some of the things you use during transformations. Obviously, they've put a ton of work into creating systems to accompany that specific weapon, such as stances, but we still don't know if it's the only weapon. It could be a situation like God of War, where for a large portion of the game, you have one weapon, and then it suddenly throws another at you, changing the entire dynamic of combat. But it seems like they might stick to the one thing, even though, like I said, transformations, that changes things a bit. What we do know is everything we've seen so far looks amazing, and all of the different environments that they've shown off, the different and varied bosses. There's a poisonous scorpion-like boss, a boss that looks like he'd be down for eating some frosted flakes, and another that is a giant horrifying insect abomination. It really is a joy to look at, and considering they've already been willing to show off demos and give them out to outlets, it's a very good sign. A lot of developers try to hide what they're doing until the last second, and that's when you know something is wrong. Black Myth Wukong has done the opposite, so I have high hopes for how the release will go. And one of the things that interests me the most as a lore nerd is how exactly they'll tie all of this into the Journey to the West. There's a lot of lore to dig into there, and it looks like they've scrapped the shovel and pulled out the tractor for this one. They're really trying to dig in. Wukong is a figure that is no stranger even to us in the Western world. He's appeared in a lot of different games over the years. League of Legends is one major example of that. It seems like we'll be taking control of the titular character at the beginning of his journey, but this might actually not be the case. In one of the trailers, we actually see another older character that has Wukong's staff, which could mean that he is actually Wukong himself. So, who then is the protagonist? We only know a few things about him. He's called the Destined One by a lot of characters in the game. Sometimes disparagingly, he's someone that is coming into his own. We're helping him to gain all the powers that he comes into. For example, there's a boss that has the ability to turn into stone. I mentioned a little bit of that earlier. By defeating that boss, we gain the ability for ourselves, which is something I think is really cool. Gaining new abilities through defeating bosses and stuff like that. And we still haven't seen the leveling system, though we know it exists. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've seen it. It'll be interesting to see how it compares to other similar games. Will it lean more into something like God of War, more into something like a Souls game, or will it be something completely new and unique? In Journey to the West, the story that this is based off from, Wukong has 72 transformations. I find it pretty unlikely that we'll be getting all of those, but I'm definitely curious to see the ones that we do end up getting. So far we've seen a couple, and there are many more that we haven't seen yet. And some of the more interesting transformations that we've seen so far include a golden cicada, and a bat. When you transform into the cicada, you're able to fly around through the zone without engaging in combat with different enemies, which allows you to not only get around easier, but you can also listen in on conversations of the enemies that you find. There's also a part that was shown where we see our character turn into a bat, giving us the ability to fly further into the air. I'm pretty curious about that because we don't know what the limits of these abilities are yet, because surely we can't just turn into one of these creatures and skip 90% of the game, although I guess in Souls you can kind of do that, so not out of the question. I'm also pretty curious to see if there will be any hub zones with NPCs or anything like that. We've seen characters that appear to be helping us along the way, including this character who has been labeled by some as an Earth God. It also seems to be the case that this game takes place after the events of Journey to the West. So it'll be interesting to see how the story plays out in relation to that. Will it be sort of an echo of that story? So we follow in the footsteps of Wukong, or will it be something entirely new that includes many of those characters? I have a pretty good feeling about this game. It has all the makings of a game of the year about it. It's hard not to get overly hyped, even though I just said that, but I really do think this is going to be something special. The only thing that makes me hesitate to say this will live up to that hype is the fact that this is a relatively unproven studio, which isn't to say they have no experience. They've put out 2 previous games. One is an RTS that is released right now in early access called Art of War Red Tides. The other is a card game based on the 3 Kingdoms, so pretty different from what Black Myth Wukong is. They had initially worked on an MMO called Asura Online, which was their first attempt at making a game based on Journey to the West. So clearly, this is something they are passionate about, something they really want to do. So that's why I really do believe this project will do well. So what do you think? Are you excited like I am for Black Myth Wukong? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching.